All right. Afternoon, folks. Thanks to those of you who've logged in a bit earlier. That certainly helps with settling things before we kick off. We are starting at 1 o'clock, as it states there on the opening slide. We're just going to give guys a few more minutes to log in and probably 1 or 2 minutes after 1 o'clock, just so that everybody gets a chance to get in and get settled. So we'll commence shortly. Looking forward to it.
End of the year.
All right, excellent. So we seem to be filling up fast. We're up to nearly 30 participants. Really good. Some recognizable names here again. So welcome back again to our next webinar. As I mentioned earlier, we'll kick off just after 1 o'clock, after the rest of the people have joined. Everyone is muted at the moment. Could ask you to please keep your mics muted for the duration of the presentation. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. I'll just go through some of the housekeeping rules and explain all those components to you shortly. So again, waiting for those folks to join. We'll kick off again shortly. Okay, so we got some good numbers up. Thanks to all those again who logged in early. We have a few more joining, but that will continue throughout the session. Wanted to welcome everybody to today's webinar. Welcome back if you're coming in for the second time or the third time. Our topic today is digital course development, which is something that certainly we are trying to apply a lot in with our teams and our functions. Hopefully, you'll find this a valuable session. The presenter is she's very good at what she does, and I should add that today is a presenter's birthday, so feel welcome to wish you a happy birthday. Joining you today from a bit of a cold and wet Johannesburg. I'm not sure what it's like where you are. Interesting being locked in, noticing all the different weather patterns. So without further ado, just on the housekeeping issues, most people are muted now, so thank you very much for that. If we could ask folks just to maintain your muted situation for the time being. As I mentioned earlier, there will be an opportunity to have an open mic session towards the end, and people can ask some questions. However, in the meantime, we are monitoring, and chat session is being monitored by several capable folks from the Eiffel Corp team. So please feel free at any time to post your questions during the presentation in the chat section. And what we will do is we'll copy those questions and make sure that they're answered either during the course of the presentation, and we have allocated some time at the end as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our presenter for today. That is Salmarie Lotz. Salmarie, please take it away.
Good day, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us today on the webinar. My name is Salmarie Lotz, and I'm a project manager at Eiffel Corp. I have almost 20 years of experience in the online development space, first as a developer, but most of the time as a project manager. I actually come from a corporate background where I did project management for corporate online development. And then I joined Eiffel Corp to specialize a little bit more in the higher education field. So today I just want to share some of my experience with you. So things that I will be discussing today is why is project management so important for online development? We will discuss basic skills required for a project manager, the 3 biggest project management constraints, 4 steps, processes to develop online training courses. And then I'm going to give over to Chanel, who's a senior instructional designer at Eiffel Corp. So she can share a little bit of her experience and what impact did project management have on her. After that, we will have a nice question and answer session where you can share all your questions with me, and I'll try to answer that for you. Okay, so let's start. Why is project management so important for digital development? So what is project management? Project management is a way that people organizes and manages resources that's necessary to complete a project. I think that is very clear to all of us. But why is it important for digital development? So I think most of you in the higher education space can relate with this. Putting your online content online is usually very overwhelming, as there are many stakeholders, resources, tasks, processes, and procedures that we have to keep in mind, and you don't know where to start. So what project management does, it creates a little bit of structure to your chaos. It acts as a tick list for your to-do list, and it keeps all relevant people on your project on the same page. Once your project is structured, you will have way more control over your budget and your resources and your scope, as well as your timelines. So what skills do you require to be a project manager? So let's start at the beginning. Managing people. I think that is a very obvious one, because you now have to manage a lot of people across a lot of teams. Time management is also a good one, because now all of a sudden you don't have to manage your own time, but the time of a lot of other resources and people. Effective communication. That skill is extremely important because communication can make or break your project. Then you have to also have good planning skills, controlling skills, conflict resolutions. That can be a tough one. And also problem solving. As a project manager, you always have to think on your feet. If you don't have the skills, don't think you can do it. You can do it. The only thing is that you will still have a little bit tougher times at some stages. But trust me on this one, all those skills get better with experience. Um, then the next topic we're going to quickly touch on is the three biggest project management constraints. So in any project management, there's a lot of constraints. I mean, there's things like risks and people, skills, equipment, reliability, etc. But I think the three biggest constraints on any project is time, cost, and scope. So let's quickly look into each one of them. Time. Okay, so time is a very crucial factor that you unfortunately have no control over. The completion of tasks depend on a number of factors, such as the people on the project, as well as the skills. So from all my online development experience, I can really tell you that the main reason for a project to fail in most cases is a lack of resources. So make double sure you have the right resources on your project. And also make sure that you know what your resources capabilities is. One. The next one we will talk about is cost. So it is very, very important that the project manager and the client sit in the beginning of the project and discuss the estimated cost of the project. That will ensure that the project is developed or implemented below a certain cost. A typical example of a cost of how cost will influence is sometimes we as project managers have to allocate additional resources in order to meet deadlines with a penalty of additional cost. So cost is always a very tough one to manage as well. Then we get to the scope part. So what is the scope? A scope refers to the total amount of work that must be done in order to deliver the program with a specific function or features. So in short, it includes everything that must go into a project that we need to address by project teams right in the beginning of each project. So we call it the kickoff meeting. In this meeting, sit around a table and discuss what's in of scope and out of scope with the client so that there's no surprises later in the project. Document everything that is in and out of scope in a charter document. So a good project manager will always know how to manage both the scope of the project and any changes in the scope that will impact time and cost. For example, let's think about animation. An animation was scoped. Okay, so there was no scope for an animation, but now halfway along the line, we see that there might be a need for animation. Now I'm, as a project manager, know my resources very well. I know their capabilities, and I know I have a brilliant animator who can quickly do this animation in, say, for instance, 2 hours. Those 2 hours won't have a major effect on the cost or the time, and everybody is happy. Or what you can do is you, for instance, scoped for 5 animations, and halfway through the client says to you, I actually wanted a video. So then you can start negotiating with the client to say, okay, a video takes longer than an animation. Let's say I give you 1 video and 2 animations, instead of 5 animations. And then there's no impact on cost and there's no impact on time, and everybody is happy. So there's always just, you always just need to think on your feet a little bit and make a plan, because there's also always a way out.
Salma, could I make a comment
Oh,
there that
yes,
might be
please,
useful?
Miles.
So, I mean, this is typical of the experience that we have Eiffel Corp seen on a lot of the consulting programs where we're doing content development. Is because we combine many of these projects on the content side with skills programs. Oftentimes, we're providing consulting skills and development skills to the people who we're working with, typically lecturers or teachers or trainers, as we build their content. So as their skills rise and they see the possibilities available with the content as we create it, it kind of improves they see the kind of value in what we're doing on the content side, and they obviously start exploring those possibilities. So what that leads to is some interesting conversations around how we can actually better apply and what more content, so like those animations or other digital artifacts we can introduce into their courses, because their skill as a digital facilitator starts improving. So that sometimes leads to difficult conversations, and which is why I think the point that you made is, tell me, about maintaining very strict control over setting expectations is so important in the beginning, because as those skills improve and the facilitation side improves, there's an expectation that the level of content that was originally decided upon is going to improve as well. So, and I mean, Selma, you can attest to this. We have interesting conversations with lecturers typically who start saying, well, why can't we start exploring these ideas when we're actually constrained by what the project can actually produce at this time? So I think the point you're making there, Selma, is really important for everyone to think about, is that it's very important to kind of set those limits on what you can actually do in the beginning with the digital content program, because you will run into trouble later on when you really start exploring the capabilities of the tools that are developed on the content side. And while it's actually a very good thing that the lecturers are now really engaging with the content, you might have many other courses to develop as well. So I think if you can, you also need to build some little bit of leverage or time inside your projects so that you can cater for these enhanced needs as they start coming online.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Miles. But like I also said previously, communication. Make sure that there is very good communication between all the stakeholders and all the team members involved in this team. So there's fewer surprises later on. And everybody knows and understand exactly what the work and the deliverable involves. And we can all stay focused on the right deliverables. But yes, the scope might change, and it usually does. I've never managed a project where there was no scope change. But there's also always ways and means to get around it. If it's really an outrageous request, then you can do a scope change. But usually there's workarounds within a project to cater for all those things. My next, okay, so the next thing is, okay, we've discussed the scope. The next thing that we want to discuss is quality. So quality, although it's not part of the project management triangle, it's the ultimate objective of every delivery, at least of my deliveries, okay? So quality is very important. And the triangle that has scope, cost, and time on the corners, with quality in the middle, is just because to say, if there's any change in cost or time or scope, be aware it will have, or it might have, impact on the quality. So in this configuration, quality is seen as a relative fixed target, while the project manager has control over the other three elements. Okay. So let's step over to the 4-step process to develop online training courses. I know there's a lot of steps. There's ADDIE steps, and there's a lot of different processes to develop online training. I would really strongly suggest you go through all the different processes and see what works the best for you. Okay. So for the purpose of this webinar, I chose to use the initiation, planning, execution, and closure process in Eiffel. So each learning project differs from the next to next, but there are no certain basic steps that you can follow for successful creating an online course. I'm going to share some basic steps. And remember, different institutions may modify it based on their processes. One size does not fit all. And you as a project manager must be very flexible enough to adapt to that. So the first step we're going to talk about is the initiation one. Okay, in this step, you have the opportunity to meet with all the stakeholders and the SMEs to discuss the nitty-gritty of the project. You may be very tempted to skip this step, but you should not do that. Please stick to this step. The intention of this step is to give you a chance to get to know all the requirements directly from the stakeholders and clarify all doubts. In this meeting, we usually call it the kickoff meeting. You get to understand the client's requirements and expectations. You set the milestones. You finalize the roles and responsibilities of all the team members. And this step, you can always finalize your project charter. And this document usually consists of project objective, requirements, deliverables, risk involved, as well as the budget. Your SMEs might have a lot of information, but might not voluntarily share it with everyone. So you need to extract that information from them. So keep on asking questions. The more questions you ask, the more you know. You might not want to jot down a few questions before, you may want to jot down a few questions before the meeting, but do not be restricted to that. Be open to change, and at any time you think the discussion is leading into a different direction. So yes, in this initiation, this is where you have to ask questions. This is a very, very important step that will give everybody around the table a clear indication of what's the deliverables, what's the expectations, and everything around the project.
Summary.
Oh, Nick? Yeah, sure.
There. So I think also, I mean, people shouldn't be intimidated by the length of this list and potentially some of the complexity that it might entail. I mean, we at Eiffel Corp, we try and keep things as simple as possible. Sometimes many of the components in this are, it's a page or a page and a half, maybe 2 pages. I think keeping it simple in language that people understand and that's accessible. Again, thinking about the major stakeholders, they are lecturers, they're SMEs who teach in a particular field of discipline. Their focus is teaching. It's not necessarily on managing a project, which is a job in itself. So I think it's important to keep that simple for them so that they can relate to it. And then what's also important, as important as it is to write down what will be done, it's also important to list the exclusions of what won't be done. And kind of linking with that point I made earlier. So they think about, we won't be doing animations. We're going to only do this for each objective. We'll cover this type of introduction for this unit. Something like that. So, and if you can, you even start building, and sorry, not to presume what you're about to say, Samri, you start building your kind of course standard so that they can sign that off. And that becomes your kind of go-to document when, unfortunately there is, times when you might run into a bit of trouble and expectations aren't met. You go back to that document and people are, okay, right, this is actually what we decided on. Let's have a conversation from this point, as opposed to, he said, she said types of scenarios, which can obviously lead to conflict.
I totally agree with you, Miles.
Sorry to interrupt you again. I just wanted to add that it's important to include your stakeholders from the beginning, because you also get their buy-in.
Yes.
And so that is something we just need to keep in mind, is that to include those stakeholders so that you have the buy-in, which also makes the project a lot easier further down the line.
Absolutely, Nikki. I totally agree with you as well. So all the stakeholders needs to be included in the initiation meeting without any doubt. So everybody needs to be on the same page of what is in scope, what is out of scope, and what is our main focus to get to the deliverable. How we are going to get there, who's going to be responsible for what. So yeah, after the initiation progress, everybody on the team, from the client side and from the project management side, needs to be on the same page. Okay, can I continue? Any other inputs? Great, let's continue. So the next phase is the planning phase. Okay, so the planning phase is extremely important for the success of your project. In this phase, you need to decide on the content, the visuals, the resources, the tools. Do you have the right licenses, timelines, and so on? This is a very, very good time to draft initial project plan. So the plan may not be fixed. It might not be perfect, but it's a good way to start with, just to give your project a little bit of structure. So as soon as the project plan is ready, you have some direction to move ahead, and you can always change the project plan as you go ahead. So nothing is set in stone in this planning session. It is just to give your whole project a little bit of structure. Okay. So after you're done with the planning, we move over to the execution phase. Okay, so in this phase, you unpack the content and develop the storyboard, and you get sign off before you put the content online. Okay, this is also the place where you create all media elements, or some people might call it artifacts, like videos, animation, graphics, audio, etc. And once that is done, you take everything together, you build the program, and you deliver the final course. As a project manager, you need to monitor the process very regularly to ensure that you are moving according to plan, okay? There's a lot of coordination to be done between the different teams, so it's your task as the project manager to keep the different teams in sync. For example, you must ensure that your graphic artists are ready with all the images when it's time for your content developers to start with their part. So once the storyboard is ready and the graphic guys are ready, you can start with your production or whatever works for you. So you must monitor all the activities minutely. And if you find any deviation from the project plan, you have to take immediate steps to correct. So it's a very, very good idea. In this step, I know, Miles, you mentioned you mentioned it in the initiation phase. As a project manager, you can see where it fits best, but it's always a good idea to provide the client with a prototype or a template to make him see how the product is going to look like. You put in all the branding elements, you put in most of some of the content, just to give the client a glimpse of how the project will look at the end. Okay, don't wait until the end. Don't do all the development and then ask the client feedback. I've learned very hard lessons over the years. It's worse, then you have to redo everything. So by this is how it's going to work. This is going to be the layout, and ask the client if he's happy. If he's happy, don't start with the development and ask these questions. Okay, so after the execution phase, we go on to the closure. Okay, so we are always very tempted to skip this phase as well. But this phase is really, really very important, because in this phase, you get feedback from everybody, okay? We usually encourage a closeout session, closeout session, usually within the team. And in this session, we discuss everything that went right as well as everything that went wrong, and document that. And see everything that goes right as a nice way to go forward. And everything that went wrong, you need to understand why it went wrong and how can you avoid it going wrong in the future. So we always have like a closeout meeting, have various people around the table and give inputs and see if we get another project, how can we improve on all the things that went wrong and how can we go forward with things that went right. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to hand over to Chanel Long. She is a senior instructional designer at Eiffel Corp. And she had the opportunity to work without a project manager and with a project manager. So she's going to give you a little bit of feedback from her side on on her experience working with a project manager. Chanel, are you ready?
Thanks, Elmarie. I'm ready. So just a bit about myself is I've been working for Eiffel Corp for the last nearly 7 years, and I actually work remotely. I live in Durban and we don't have an office in Durban. And I don't get to attend all the meetings in person with our clients. So I remember in the beginning, the contrast between having a project manager and not stood out to me, especially when Salmarie asked me about this yesterday. So yeah, let's start here. I remember having a meeting with our manager Miles and bringing up just giving feedback of some of the issues that I was struggling with, which was I was struggling to focus on our projects because we had so much going on and each one ran differently. And there was just a lot of almost, it was difficult to know the flow and the structure of where we were going and to remain on task. And I remember him mentioning that we were hiring Salmarie. And so I was really excited. And then when Salmarie started, it was awesome. But at the same time, there was a lot of growing pains because we weren't used to having a project manager. We were used to kind of working in team, but very much on our own too. So it was difficult to begin to learn all these structures and timelines and flow. But within a few months, I could see the change and the difference. So regarding like flow and structure, everything changed. We had these workable timelines. Expectations were set in the beginning, and we knew the expectations right to the end. Even with changes, those were constantly communicated, that we knew this is where we're at and this is where we're going. Also, like Salmarie mentioned, delegation. I knew what the expectations were for my role in the project specifically. I also love that Salmarie often, with resource allocation, she'll allocate tasks and projects to us for our strengths. So I prefer a lot more of the look and feel or the animation or the video. And what she's done is a lot of times put me on those projects, and that helps me work to my strengths, and I really enjoy that. And she's learned what our strengths are over the last few years. Also, regarding focus, there's a lot less unnecessary distractions. One of my complaints before we had Salmarie was how admin intensive the projects were becoming, because we had quite a few going on, and obviously we're in contact with lecturers. So there was a lot of admin, and it was hard to stay focused on actually creating the content. And with the project manager, that a lot of the admin disappeared, and we got to do the content creation and building of the courses and the instructional design. It really helped with us remaining focused on the tasks that we were allocated. And then meetings and check-ins. In the beginning, it was very different having so many meetings and check-ins and it being so consistent. but it helps keep you on track. You know, you're getting consistent feedback and you're getting consistent help. You know where to go if you need help. And also, for me personally, it helps me remain accountable for our staggered timelines. Before, we didn't necessarily have those constant check-ins, so we weren't accountable throughout the projects for each task. It was just kind of beginning and end, and maybe one in the middle, but it really helped not leave things to last minute or push, but actually have these staggered timelines. And then lastly, just having the clear communication, knowing who I can ask Salmarie about all the questions, knowing that she's the person I go to if I have questions on projects, or she knows who to direct me to if I do have questions or queries, and constantly giving me feedback on what's working and what's not working on the project. And lastly, I didn't mention this before, but Salmarie's a great encourager. She will always send us encouragement. Anyone on the team, I know that I'm speaking for them too. If we finished a project or we've done something well, it really helps having a project manager that consistently encourages you. Yeah, she's just a great project manager, and considering the struggles we had before and what she streamlined and helped all of us remain on task and focused. And there's a definite difference between not having a project manager and actually having a project manager. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chanel. Thank you for all your kind words as well. I think we can open now the table for some question and answer sessions. So if there's any questions, please let me know and I will try to answer them as well as possible.
Thank you so much, Salmarie. At the moment, we haven't got any questions. I'm just waiting for them to come through. But in the meantime, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Are you ready for it? First of all, we as designers and developers love the fact that you sort out all our admin. So let's just start there. But what I wanted to ask you is, what do you do when you have a project that needs to start next week and you're not going to have time to follow all those beautiful steps? What is your tip? You know, we always have these emergency, I think we can all stand, we've had the emergency projects that are starting yesterday and needed to be finished 3 weeks ago. What tips would you give people if they're running or managing a project like that?
Okay, so I think one of my slides talked about a project manager always needs to think on his feet. Okay, so there's always ways and means to get past all these things that's out of your control. I think the biggest thing is just to start breathing and then start at the beginning. See who is available and who can do that. And start to do the planning, start to do the admin until you have some resources free to assist you on the project. Not all the tasks in a project is dependable on each other. So sometimes there's stuff that can be done in between while you wait for some other resources to be freed up to come onto your project. I mean, there's a lot of admin to be done in the beginning. You have to do the planning, you have to do the charter document. So yeah, that is my start with the things that's not dependable on anything else, and see how fast you can free up some resources to help you on this project. Did I answer your question, Nikki?
Yes, you did. That was very good. Thank you so much. I'm just having a look here to see if we've got a question. Okay, so Rais Khan, I think it's a lady, she's asked, please could you advise on software applications that you would recommend as project tools?
Okay. That depends from person to person. Once I shifted from the corporate environment to the higher educational part, I got to work with several different projects tools and stuff that is. I think the most important one is to see what works for you, what works for your team, and what works for your client. Okay. Sometimes I love to work in Microsoft projects, but not everybody understands Microsoft projects. So I usually have to translate my project plans into nice visible images to the clients. There are lots and lots of tools that you can use. I think the most important part is, what are you comfortable with? And what does your client understand? And according to that, choose. There's no right and wrong answer. There's no best tool and the worst tool. I mean, I really have some projects that I'm using Excel, because Excel just works for the team and the client and for me on that specific project. So, yeah, it depends. Go and have a look. There's thousands of different tools that you can use. See what tool works for you.
Thank you, Samri. I also think it comes down to budgets. Am I correct? Some of those tools are very expensive.
Yes, Nikki, you're absolutely right. So I know Microsoft Projects is a very nice tool to have, but it's also extremely expensive tool to have. So, but Excel works great. Excel, there's nothing wrong with Excel. If you have Excel, you can make a project plan come to life. Um, there's other tools as well that's for free. So if you want to know the different tools and what tools are there, maybe I can share with you a couple of tools that work best for me. And you can try it out. Send me a message and I will get back to you on the different tools there is.
Great. So, Marie, I think what we can do is we'll just include that in our response that goes out on social media.
Absolutely, Nikki.
We have got a question from Maville where I got your pronunciation of your name incorrect last week. I apologize. I think this week it was worse. This is the question. Do we include students as one of the stakeholders during the initiation stage? If we do, what role do we expect them to play during the kickoff meeting? And I think Miles also might be able to assist in this question.
Okay, so Miles, before you maybe say something, stakeholders, I know we all always like to include as much as possible people into the meetings and the decisions we make, but sometimes that can be our down run. Okay, so I would suggest just really, really keep the most important people in your stakeholders meetings. As a lecturer, you know your students, you know what they want, you know what they like. So I would like to be a lecturer to be a representative of the students, but don't involve too many people into your project. That complicates the project. Decide who's your main stakeholders and stick to that. The more people, the more fingers in the pie, the more complex it gets.
Yeah, I mean, adding to that, so I mean, all good points there. I would also, encourage people to remember that obviously, a digital course at the end of the day is an academic output. So, your most important stakeholder is going to be your lecturer and the person presenting the course, or the head of the department, they're the ones responsible ultimately for delivering the learning on that course, making sure the students achieve those outcomes. So they have to be 100% sure that they're happy with the design, because ultimately the facilitation, whichever form it takes, supplemental, blended, fully online, is going to fall to them. So it's obviously critical you include them. In respect of including students, I saw the one question there. I think, yes, you could potentially include them, but in a very limited fashion. I mean, we certainly don't want, what's the saying? You don't want the tail wagging the dog. I mean, people are, stakeholders. We can't help it, but we intrinsically biased towards things that suit ourselves. And I mean, students, obviously, we obviously can't give them any kind of too much insight into kind of how their semesters carried out and all that type of thing. So you're going to have to be careful with what types of things you share with your students if you are going to include them. If you can get someone to kind of give you some experience on, how the course flow works and the potential experience that a student might have, I think that's probably good enough.
Yes.
As long as they relatively, I think if you're supporting students in the right way, and again, talking about the skills, if the lecturers or the person presenting the course, the trainer, is equipped enough in terms of the facilitation components, I think they know their students too. I mean, we shouldn't forget that not only are lecturers, qualified SMEs, but many of them have got years and years of teaching experience. So they know how students react to certain types of content, the typical problems that they might have with the things they present, and importantly, the context of their learners as well. So where their learners come from, the devices that they have. I think that's also an important thing to share when you're doing the planning is, you think about the context of your learner, how they are going to access this content, where they will do it, and how it's going to affect how you teach that course. Because that's obviously going to inform how the design works as well, which is obviously then intrinsic to the project management component as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, I think that's great answers. I also think that it's important as the client, you would then also report back. So you wouldn't necessarily have all the stakeholders in your stakeholders meeting, but you would report back to your inner circle of stakeholders that don't quite make the main stakeholders group, just on the progress of the project as well.
Yes, you're absolutely right,
Okay.
Nikki.
What I've got Lungi, I've got a question here. I just want to have a look. She's asking, how often do you review courses that have been developed? Do you wait for SMEs to start the process, or do you initiate it?
Okay, so after the development, it depends on on your institution and your subject and everything. But I think once a year to review your course might be good. Yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe once a year, I would suggest once a year to review all your courses. But I mean, if there's significant changes to your course, it might be more sooner.
I think it's also important, Salmi, it depends on your program. So if you are working with a professional body, they might need to come and do accreditation, say, every 4 years on your program.
Yes.
So you would want to make sure that your program is being reevaluated within that period as well.
Exactly.
So it really does differ. I've got another question from Michael. He wants to know, are there templates for analyzing stakeholders? His initial question, so it's a part two of the question, the beginning of the question is, how do you go about analyzing my stakeholders for the project, and are there any templates for analyzing stakeholders?
Sure. I think on Google you can find right about anything. So I'm not aware of any of those documents. But I'm sure if you go and search on Google, you will find something like that.
I could also suggest you, just a sort of generic stakeholder maps. If you Google that, there's lots of templates around the map, and it's usually got those 4 quadrants, and then you just kind of allocate, your stakeholders according to who you need to keep informed and who needs to have, those people that have control. So, typically your project sponsor, they're going to be up in that top right-hand side because they potentially are, the one who controls the budgets, and who potentially, certainly within the university space, the one who signs off on the project as well. So it's critical to keep that person in control. The lecturer typically is the person that's going to be there as well. But somebody like a head of department, they need to know what's going on, but they don't necessarily need to be involved in every single project decision. They just need to know that everything is going well and if there's any problems. And then, as you mentioned, students as well. Maybe there's other sort of administrators or LMS administrators. Those people can go in the bottom left where they don't have much control. They just really kind of need some basic information about what's happening. So I think, as somebody said there, just Google stakeholder map and you'll find nice templates that you can use.
The stakeholders is usually also the people who's making the decisions, who's making the final decisions, who's signing the contracts, who's signing um, the proposals, the head of the like the deans or whatever. But yeah, I think Google might give you a good indication.
Thanks, Summary. I just want to see, okay, I haven't got any more questions here. I just wanted to, let's just check I've got everything covered. The big question is everyone wants to know, how do we get copies of this presentation? So just so everyone knows, you will get an email with a recording of this with the answers for all the questions that we've received. We also, you should be able to get the old webinars, the previous in the series, if you go onto any of our social media sites. So if you look at Eiffel Corp on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, there should be links with the recordings and those answers there as well. Then I'm going to ask Salma, I'm going to put her on the spot, because now I'm sure there's some people that are eagerly wanting to become project managers, and they want to know if you had one characteristic to be a good project manager, one skill, what do you think the most important skill is?
I think the main skill is to put structure, to be a person who can put structure to chaos. Yeah, that will be, because to put structure to chaos, that will be my main skill for
I'm so glad you said that, because I'm going to follow that up with a question. Now, we all know life happens, and we are dealing a lot with higher education. How do the strikes and everything like that affect project management, and what's the best way to deal with these situations, and even our shutdown? How are we coping?
Okay, so like I said before, a project manager needs to be extremely flexible, because there's a lot of things happening in this life. I mean, people get sick, people go on leave, there's a coronavirus, there's load shedding. So a project manager needs to be very, very flexible. But keep in mind always time and cost and scope. So you need to be very flexible, think on your feet, to always keep time, cost, and scope in mind, because all of that will contribute to the overall quality of your deliverable.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Salmarie. It was very interesting. I'm sure that the team can agree with you there. Miles, I don't know if you would like to take over for the rest of the session.
No, not at all. I think, Samri, you've done a fantastic job. So thank you for giving us your insights on project management. I mean, for my part, we can't emphasize enough how much of a difference this has made to our ability to manage content development projects. I think Chanel described it there quite aptly. There was a lot of strain being put on our instructional design team and anybody involved in content programs, because to switch your mind from jumping into content, having an academic conversation with the lecturer and understanding their challenges and trying to innovate in new ways to how they can shape that content for a particular course. And then to go and have a sort of project type meeting, talking about very operational issues, sometimes with the same stakeholder, other times with different people. It can make for some sort of very difficult working environments. So as I said, it put a lot of stress on people. And yeah, the role that certainly Salmarie fulfills for us is extremely valuable. And so it's something that I'd highly recommend to any other organization. I mean, obviously, we have to be cognizant of resource constraints, and not everywhere can afford a dedicated project manager. But certainly, I think as we're seeing skills now change somewhat, I mean, certainly this whole COVID situation is putting light on that. There is abilities within other team members, potentially on the technical side. So there's a lot of commonality between what people who manage the LMS, for instance, and e-learning teams do in terms of project management deliverables for technical systems and around content. So, I mean, they are different people. They have different sets of skills typically. But I mean, where needs must, and people's kind of need to be repurposed within teams. So that's one consideration. So yeah, I think it makes all the difference. So if you can allocate these tasks to somebody, it does make a really big difference. And I think you will see the difference in the SMEs and the lecturers and the trainers that you work with as well, because sometimes you do have difficult conversations as a project manager. We alluded to that. I mean, you spoke about, tell me about the most important skills project managers should have. I mean, I completely agree that that's one of them. I think conflict management is also a very important one. Hopefully you're not going to run into too much of that, but I think it's all about setting those expectations. So the structure comes first. It's impossible to keep everybody happy all the time. And again, with all those timelines that come into it, you are going to put people under pressure. As a project manager, you're going to push for deliverables. You're going to have to ask lecturers sometimes uncomfortable questions about where the content is it available, is it ready? And again, I mean, we've spoken many times on some of our previous webinars, about the potential readiness of lecturers to do these things. Sometimes they don't actually have this content ready, or it's not nearly ready enough to be presented. So you have to push them, and in that time, in those cases, you have to be a bit tough, But the good thing is you can go back to your structure, and you can rely on that to say, I'm not the one putting the pressure on you. We're just doing this as part of the process, and these are your deliverables. So yeah, lots of important skills there. So if no one else has any more questions, just to remind everybody that obviously if you're attending this, we have your email address. Thank you very much for supplying that. Marketing team has been doing a great job of publicizing the webinars. So we will put out the links and a recording for this to you very shortly, along with all the notes and the presentation itself. As we do always, is that we welcome any comments on this and any other webinars we've done. And if you have any inquiries, obviously please follow up with everybody from the Eiffel Corp team that is on this webinar. We have a lot of the services personnel here, so thank you for attending. We'll respond then to any of this and any other inquiries that you might have. So yeah, any other comments from your side, Sami, before we close out for the day?
No, not really, Miles, but I really want to encourage everybody on this call, try to do it. It's not as hard as it seems. And yes, just give it a go. The first one might not be perfect, but it will really, really improve over time.
Excellent. Thanks, Sami. So we're ending a little bit earlier today than usual. I'd like to extend thanks to all of our participants today. Great questions as well. We value your input and the fact that you've made time to attend. We will put out details of our next webinar out shortly, whenever that might be. We haven't picked a topic yet, but we will be sure to let you know. Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Eiffel Corp team. Chat to you all soon.
Thanks, guys.